7:14, it says, if my people who are called by my name. So God is calling us to get our hearts right with Him.
This is my mom, my brother. I stand redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. I stand redeemed before the great I am. When He looks at me, He sees the nail-scarred hands that bought my liberty. I stand redeemed. God, you are love. God, you are King. God, you rule over everything. You have so much power to set the souls free, but you gave us a choice. By your grace we believe. Jesus, I have sinned. Jesus, I repent. You are a God of second chances. Jesus, I believe. My soul has been set free. You are a God who redeems. God, you are my shield. God, you are safe. You saved us with your amazing grace. You have so much power to set the souls free, but you gave us a choice. By your grace we believe. Jesus, I have sinned. Jesus, I repent. You are a God of second chances. Jesus, I believe. My soul has been set free. You are a God who redeems. You are a God who redeems. I am the King of Kings. I am the great I am. I've walked along this earth, and I do it all again, just to see one more soul bow down and wash my feet. It'd bring tears to my eyes just for one more to believe. So call upon my name, and I will set you free. The debt has done been paid on a hill of Calvary. Sing praises to my name, speak a prayer of belief. Trust in your heart that I came in, and I will set you free. And you'll live with me eternally. Now I'm your Father above. You can even call me your friend. Now go and tell this world how I washed away your sin. Speak highly of my name. Tell them of my grace, so they can live forever with the angels and saints. If they call upon my name, I will set them free. The debt has done been paid on a hill of Calvary. Sing praises to my name, speak a prayer of belief. Trust in your heart that I came in, and I will set you free. And you'll live with me eternally. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. So call upon my name, and I will set them free. The debt has done been paid on a hill of Calvary. Sing praises to my name, speak a prayer of belief. Trust in your heart that I came in, and I will set you free. And you will live with me eternally. Yes, you will live with me. Yes, you will live with me. You will live with me eternally.
Thank you very much for that beautiful music. Brother Ed brought us a message of passion last week when he was explaining about his program. He has a deep burning desire to see the word spread about the persecuted Christians. And I think we as Christians need to be more passionate about our desires to serve our God. Brother Ed, would you come and bring your program?
How are we working? Okay. I'm going to be a little off track tonight from what I had planned. Book of Psalms says that David meditated on God in the watches of the night. And last night I wasn't meditating so much as God was talking to me, and he let me know that there was something that I needed to pass on to the church. And it goes along with what I had been planning, what he'd been talking to me about all along. I guess the best way to start, I went to the library the other day. They were selling books, and there was a little book there, and I noticed on the back cover that it was by Brother Andrew, the same man that wrote God's Smuggler. He's the one that started Open Doors, and I picked it up, and because of that, and took it home, and I was amazed at what it had in it. It's called Operation Nineveh. And it's basically a Bible study on Jonah, which Jonah's not a feel-good book to read. I mean, Jonah wasn't a happy camper all through the book. But there was some insight into this, and I want to share one thing with you. In the book, he talks, Brother Andrew's from Holland, and he happened to live pretty close to where Corrie ten Boom lived. And you're all familiar with Corrie ten Boom. And he said that he had a conversation with her, and she was getting up in years, and as he got ready to go, Corey gave him this admonition. She says, "Keep looking down." And Brother Andrew kind of shook his head and thought, well, she's getting old. She really didn't mean that. And he corrected her. He says, "No, you mean look up." And she got rather agitated with him, and she says, "No, I mean look down. Look down and see what God sees." And that's kind of what I'm basing my talk on tonight. Richard Wurmbrand and Brother Yun, two of the books back there, they talked about hating communism, but they love the communists. We hate extreme Islam, but we love the Muslims. We don't like the threat to our national sovereignty that's happening on our southern borders. But I wonder if we need to see these people coming up as God sees them. And believe me, I'm not a liberal by any sense of the word. I'm not a bleeding heart. But when I read that about what Corrie ten Boom said about we need to look down, we need to look and see how God sees the world, I think we all need to do that. Years and years ago, about 30-some years ago, when I gave my life to the Lord gave me a gift. In the parable of the talents, he calls it a talent. And when he first gave me that gift, I did what he said. I tried to multiply that talent, and I did pretty good for the first years. And then something happened. I and the Lord both know what happened, and I buried my talent, just like the man in the parable did. And here recently, the Lord came and spoke to me, and he said, "You need to dig up that talent. You need to do what I command." And so I went out and I dug up that talent, and I got it all shined up, and I raised it up before the Lord, and I said, "Lord, with your help, I'm going to multiply this talent. When you come back, you won't find me hiding my talent. I will be expanding the kingdom of God for you." And saying that, one of the things that's caused me to do is what I'm doing here. I've had a heart for the persecuted church for a number of years, but I never had the courage to get up and talk in front of people. I tried to get churches to come together for the International Day of Prayer, and I can tell you around this area, I didn't get a very good response. The other thing that I'm doing, I'm trying to initiate a weekly prayer group, and I have the approval and the encouragement from Pastor Chad for that. I'm not going to go into all the Bible verses that talks about why we should pray and that we should pray. You all have been Christians long enough to know that it's a command. I mean, it's not an option. God says, pray if you want. He doesn't say that. He says, pray for those in need, pray for the suffering church, pray for each other, pray without ceasing, pray for your brothers and sisters. So I'm going to have my wife, go ahead, hon. Sweetie, I want you to pass out those cards. I'm going to have my wife pass out some cards. They're just blank cards. And what I want each one, I'm going to have one for each one of you. What I want you to do is just simply put on there the day of the week and the time of day if you were going to attend this prayer group. If you're not interested, if you don't think you'll do it, please be honest enough to just leave the card blank. But whichever you do, and even if you only think you'd be once a month, did you give one to Ron, hon? Did you give one to Ron? On this, everybody gets a card. No, everybody gets a card. Because this is an individual thing. And this is another thing, and I don't want to beat people up, but I see in the church a lot of the gals taking the lead, and I'd like to see the guys take the lead, especially in this prayer time. It's our responsibility as leaders in our family to hold our families up, to lead in prayer. So just put the day of the week and the time of the day, and even if you're only going to go, say, once a month, that's fine. And again, if you're not interested at all, please leave it blank. But at the end of the service, when we pick up the offering, if you would please turn in those cards. If it's blank, that's good. I want them all turned back in. So this will give me an idea when I set this up after the first of the year what a good day of the week would be and a good time. I was hoping to do it late enough that some of the younger people could come. I know there's people that work every day. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of them here tonight, but I'm sure the pastor will announce it later on. We aren't going to start this till after the first of the year. The reason I'm getting involved in this is, and I don't understand, God in his sovereignty could protect our pastor. He could protect Pastor Chad. He could protect Pastor Dustin. He doesn't need us to protect his people, but yet that's what he calls us to do. He calls us to pray for these people. At the end of the service, I'm going to pass out another little thing, and it's a little story I wrote. Okay. If we don't have enough white cards, maybe we could use some of the blue cards, the prayer cards. Yes, yeah. Anyway, I'll let you sort through that. I thought I had enough. I didn't realize that was so short. And it talks about the battle between the angelic host and the angels of darkness. And when I wrote it, I could see this just as clear as if I was in the midst of it. And it's not scriptural, it's not Bible, but it could be. When you think about Daniel and when he was praying for Israel, and Gabriel came to him, and Gabriel told him, oh man of God, from the day that you asked you started to intercede for Israel, I tried to come, but I was held back by the prince of Persia. And it wasn't until Michael, the prince of Israel, came and helped me that I was free to do this. So we know that there is a battle going on, a battle of light and a battle of dark. When I see my pastor, I see him as if it was Elijah asking God to pull the veil back so you could see the other realm. And I can see angels around our pastor. Our pastors have a bullseye on their back. They need that angelic guard around them all the time, because if Satan can make them stumble, the whole church is going to dissolve. And I think of Pastor Dustin, a young man working with these young people and around these young women and stuff, and Satan can use that. We need to pray extra hard for Dustin. And then I look at Scott and Vicki here, and I can just picture they're going to have angels in front of them, angels behind them, angels all around them, because they're going into harm's way. They need that prayer covering that we're supposed to give them as believers, as brothers and sisters. We're supposed to be praying not just for each other, but for our pastor, for our missionaries, and as a lead-in for the persecuted church. This is the main thing that the persecuted church asks for. When you go to the persecuted church and you say, well, what do you need in the way of supplies and this type of thing, their main thing that they ask for is prayer. With that being said, I'm going to lead into a little video here. Go ahead and play that one, guys, if you would.
In my country, Christians are persecuted for their faith. My friend, David Alexandra, is now in prison since 3.5 years. His 3 daughters are growing up without their father.
Например, очень было это тяжело, потому что я с детства, можно сказать, папина дочка. И то есть для меня папа просто не очень было тяжело.
I was also imprisoned for teaching about Christ. My name is Salavat. I'm a pastor in northern Uzbekistan. I had been convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. After I served only 4 months, they dropped the charges and released me. I was praising God and went home to my wife and 2 daughters. When I got there, my little girl was so excited to see me. The police had been watching our house, and no one had been able to help my family. The food was gone, and for the last week they had nothing but water. Our baby couldn't even nurse, because my wife had no milk to give her. In prison, I had endured many things, but nothing prepared me for seeing my family like this. My wife asked me, "What will we do?" And I said, "We will pray, and our God will provide." The next morning, I went to work in the garden. Nothing was growing, but I didn't know what else to do. When my daughter came out to help me, she asked, "If we work in the garden, will your God give us bread?" I told her to wait, to trust in God. So we just kept working. We kept praying. A few hours later, 2 men suddenly appeared at our house. They asked if my name was Salavat. I said yes, and asked them what their names were. They said it wasn't important. And when I reached out to shake their hands, one of them placed an envelope in mine. I looked and saw that it was full of money. When I looked up, the men were gone. I don't know who they were or where they came from, but my daughter and I rejoiced. God had provided. As I share this story, I am now again being watched by the police and could be arrested at any time. I am not afraid of going back to prison, but I pray, please God, don't let my family go hungry. We can no longer meet in our church building, so we worship in the desert. Only a few brothers are able to gather at a time. We cannot even bring our Bibles. In Uzbekistan, some are afraid. Others believe the persecution is a test of our faith. David's family says this testing is hard, but it has made them stronger.
Меня зовут Саша, мне 14 лет, и мой отец, он уже 3,5 года сидит в тюрьме, то, что он пастор церкви. У меня есть большая просьба для вас, просто молиться за него, за его освобождение, просто за его здоровье, чтобы в душе он был спокоен просто и держался за Бога.
So were those men that brought the money, or were they angels? You know, as people pray for these people, how does God respond? He responds through people, but he also can respond miraculously. The Bible says, don't forget to entertain strangers, because sometimes you entertain angels unaware. But this is one example of why prayer is so important. I'd like to tell you a little story about a gal that I pray for. Her name is Twin Theodorus, and she comes from a country called Eritrea, which is over in Africa. It's close to the Red Sea. It is supposed to be an atheistic state. There is Muslims, and there are Orthodox churches. The Orthodox churches, there's only 4 of them, and they're required to preach what the dictator of Eritrea tells them to preach. The Muslims are pretty well left alone, and it's probably because they don't want to antagonize them and bring the radicals in. But Twin was put in jail when she was 23 years old for leading a Bible study. She's been in there for 14 years now. And we don't think that we have the ability to honor God, to be obedient to his word. About 8 years after Twin went to prison, she became very ill. But by this time, she had started leading people to the Lord while she was in prison. And I don't know if, you're probably not familiar with the area, but their idea of prison and our idea of prison is totally different. When you get sick over there, if you don't have someone to take care of you, you die. I mean, they don't send you to an infirmary, you just die. Their idea of a prison is a steel container sitting out in the desert. Well, you picture Yuma here at 120 degrees in the summertime, and how long would you survive in a steel container sitting out in the desert? Well, anyway, she got sick, and they sent her home to get over it, to get well. Well, she was close enough to the border that she could have ran for freedom. But she didn't. She went back and she turned herself back in when she was well, because she had a ministry in that prison. And rather than take freedom, she chose to give her life. And she's still alive. She's 23. She was 23 when she went in. She's been in 14 years now. So now she's in her mid-30s. 1/3 of her life she's given to the cause of Christ because she led a Bible study. So anyway, getting back to my actual what I had actually planned. These are questions for, I don't know why I'm getting an echo here, but I am. Okay. These are questions for yourself. I don't expect you to answer them to me. I would like you to think about them and answer them for yourself. When faced with a decision or with figuring out how to respond to something, do you find yourself turning to God first for direction, or you try to determine what to do on your own? Do you ever find it difficult to be still and wait on the Lord? If so, why do you think that is? A heart yielded to God is one that can be still before him, that waits on his timing and surrender to his plan. We often think of yielding and surrendering as being passive. And I have a verse here that I use as one of my verses that I live by. It's out of Hebrews 10:36, and it says, "For you have need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise." And what is that promise that God is talking about? He's talking about being created in the image of Christ, being perfected in the image of Christ. That's the promise. When we do his will, he perfects that image of Christ in us. He won't do it, he can't do it if we're not willing, if we're not obedient. When you surrender to the Lord, you are surrendering to his plan. Instead of striving to advance your own ideas and agenda, you are now advocating to see God's plan fulfilled in your life and in the lives of those around you. And that surrender isn't passive at all. Whenever you're waiting for God's will, that's not being passive, that's being obedient. I mentioned earlier that I spent last night listening to the Lord. Actually, he kept me up from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock this morning. And the reason he did that is because during the day, I never shut up long enough to be able to hear him. I'm talking to the Lord all the time. And I think sometimes he just says, Ed, shut up and listen to me. You know, and we don't do that. We don't sit back and we don't let God speak to our hearts and tell us what he wants us to do. It takes courage to yield to God, courage to be still, courage to wait on him, and courage to surrender to his plan. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth." An Egyptian Christian shared his dependence on the Lord. He says, "You Americans have plans A through Z. We have only one plan, and that is for God to show up. If he doesn't, we're out of luck." And in America, we just don't understand that. You know, we've got our grocery stores, we've got our gas stations, we've got our freedom. You've heard the saying, freedom isn't free. You know, and I thank God every day for being born in a country that is free. And for the men, I know we've got a lot of soldiers here, a lot of military men, and I thank God for you guys and you women that have served to keep me free. But we need to do something with that freedom. We need to be obedient. We need to act. And believe me, I know I'm the pot calling the kettle black. I have spent years doing nothing. I was a good Christian. I didn't do anything wrong, but I had buried that talent. I was not creating on the gift that God had given me. And I wonder how many in our church have still got their talent buried, have never dug that talent up, have never, and I use the word talent because it's a parable of the talent. But another word for that is gift. God has given us gifts to use for his work. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I mean, we have got a really good church. And I don't know why the Lord told me to bring this up, but don't shoot the messenger, okay? We've talked before about how being still before God gives you time and space to think about who he is. Have you thought about using the stillness to meditate on what God has revealed to you, both about the world we live in and about his word? What do you think God is saying or has said to you about these things? Have you ever thought about surrender being an active posture instead of a passive one? How does the idea of surrendering to God's plans change the way you view this concept? And then the big question is, in what ways do you think God is calling you to surrender to help the persecuted church? As I said on the first session, we've got three words. We've got sympathy, we've got empathy, and we've got compassion. Compassion is the only word that has hands and feet. The other two are a waste of time because you can feel sorry for somebody all day long, but if you don't do anything for them, you're not helping them. In the first session, I used a quote from C.S. Lewis, and I don't know if you remember, it was about a cord being used to either cord a box or to hang over a precipice, and we'll never know how good that cord is unless we try it. Well, unless we bend to God's will and become obedient to him, we will never know just how strong that cord is going to be for us when persecution comes to us. Because, folks, unless you're living in a corner in a box, you got to see what's happening in America. Scott even mentioned that this morning. I mean, he's a hard act to follow. I felt kind of funny coming up here after he gave his testimony on what he's doing. I'm thinking, boy. And then I listened to the singers up here, and oh well, I'll just keep plugging away. Anyway, if we aren't awake to the suffering of our brothers and sisters around the world, when persecution comes to this nation, and it's coming, we're not going to know how to respond. I talked about Twin Theodorus. I wish I had I've got a little picture of it at home, and I said in the first session that I usually pick 2 or 3 people and get pictures of them so I know who I'm praying for. It's when you pray for the persecuted church, it's hard to picture that many. I mean, we're talking about several million people or 200 million people. How do you put your head around that? But if you pick 1 or 2 people or 3 people, it gives you a focus. Like I mentioned in the first session, I had been praying for Andrew Brunson. He was in the news. And I know it wasn't my prayers alone that got him released. Maybe. I don't know. And then Asia Bibi, she's another one that I mean, she had been in there for, I think it was 9 years, for giving a glass of water to a fellow worker. She's been released. Now, we still need to pray for her because her life's in danger every day. They're looking for her to kill her because they believe that she blasphemed. I mean, radical Islam is so insane that there's no reason. And again, we have to realize that it's not the idea that we love, it's the people we love. Each person is a creature that God has created. God says that it's not his will that any should perish, but that all should come to the knowledge of Christ. And this is one of the big takeoffs from studying the persecuted church, is these people pray for their persecutors. This is one of the big things about the persecuted church. They pray for the people that are hurting them, that are hurting their families, that are killing them. I'm not sure that I'm there yet. If I was put into a prison and beaten every day, I'm not sure that I could pray for those people that are doing that. But God gives grace to each person at any given time, and I believe that God will give us the grace to get through this when the time comes. President Trump talks about an invasion from down south, and we look at the Central Americans and the Mexicans, but we don't know how many other people are coming across that border. I believe America, because of our turning our back on God, is under judgment, and part of that judgment we see out in the East Coast. We see the floods, we see the hurricanes. We go to California, we see the fires, and we see the mudslides. Here we've been relatively secure, except for all the people coming across the border. And we don't know how many of those people, like they say, a lot of the people are just people trying to find a better way of life. I would appreciate it if they would do it legally, but what's really at stake here is the people that are coming across that aren't Central Americans, that aren't Mexicans, that are intent on destroying our way of life. And God has allowed that as the judgment on this part of the country. I mean, we don't get the floods, we don't get the hurricanes, but we get the influx of people coming in. So as I get, I don't want us to be afraid. God says in Timothy that he has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. What I'm trying to do is bring unity in the body. As I said in the first session, there's not two churches. There's not a persecuted church and a free church. We're all the same body. We just have different parts, different members. And if this member is suffering, this member is supposed to help it out. And the church in America has been asleep. Like I said earlier, I started this back in 2015 by going to different churches and trying to get the churches involved in the International Day of Prayer, 1 day a year. And I mean, I had some churches, like the Lutheran church over here, were actually rude and basically told me they didn't even want to hear about it. Others were kind enough to let me say my say and then ignore me after I left. So I'm taking a little different tact. I'm now going to start approaching these churches with my presentation, and I would ask that you would pray for me, that God would open the door for me to go into these churches, to wake the American church up. We're living in the Laodicean church in this country. Where Scott and Vicki are going, it's a different church. It's not this asleep church where they're going. The church is either alive or it's not existent. And in a lot of the countries, I mean, you go to Iran, there's more people coming to faith in Christ in Iran right now than there are in America. Iran is like the size of one of our states, and there's more people coming to Christ in Iran than in America. We should be ashamed of ourselves. I know pastors constantly trying different things to get us out there. And again, I'm not throwing stones because I'm one of the worst there is. I mean, I just never felt called to do that. But as I look at the persecuted church, as I study on what's going on, as I look at these people, it gives me more and more courage all the time to get out there and do what the Lord wants me to do, to take that talent and increase it for the Lord and not keep it buried. I'm actually getting done here faster than I thought. So I do have a few more things I want to cover. There are several things in the back there, and again, like I told you last week, these things are all free. Please avail yourself to them. If I see where I'm just about out of a couple of them, let me know if you want them, and I've got more coming, and I will bring them in after the fact. I really would like to push that the book Extreme Devotion as a daily devotional. I've given it to the guys in my Bible study. I use it every day because when you get to feeling fat and happy and you think things couldn't get much better, you go into a devotional in that book and it brings you back to reality. It brings you back to see that there's people that it's not going too well for. And it shows you how they stand up to it. It's actually marked out for 365 days. I've gone through and I've given a date on the calendar for each day so I don't lose track. And I've gone through mine, I think, twice or three times now. But for me, it brings me that closeness of the people. It's stories about real people. It's stories about the trials of real people. It's not fairy tales. It's not fiction. Many of you are familiar with Fox's Book of Martyrs. That's stories of past martyrs that have lived years ago, and that's heart-wrenching enough as it is. But this is about every current people. These are people that are still alive, a lot of them. So I would highly recommend that. There's some magazines back there called The Voice of the Martyr, and some of them are old. I got them for the International Day of Prayer, and because I didn't get a good response, I have some left. The reason I brought them in is they have an envelope in them for the Voice of the Martyrs, if you're interested in getting on their mailing list. It's a free magazine. It gives you people to pray for. I mean, it gives you names. It gives you things that are happening with them so that you can actually put a face to your prayers. And that getting back to our prayer day that I was talking about, I want to use that prayer day once a week, and I'm going to do it for a year, and I'm hoping that I'll have others sign up. If not, I guess my wife and myself and the Lord will be a majority of three. We'll be here, you know. I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, okay, I know what I was going to say. The reason I'm starting this is we all pray individually, but if you look in the book of Acts, in the second chapter, how does chapter 2 start? It says they were all in the upper room in one accord. In other words, they were all gathered together. They were all of the same mind. And what happened? I'm not talking about tongues and fire. They lit a fire in Jerusalem, and that fire spread throughout the known world. And that's what I want to do here. You heard people, my pastor actually was talking about this morning about, and Scott was talking about revival. Well, where does revival start? Revival starts here. We need, each of us needs to catch on fire. And then that fire needs to spread throughout our church. And then that fire needs to go to the community and needs to go across America. That's the only thing that's going to save America, folks, is a revival. If we don't see a revival here, we're just as surely as can be that we're going to be a third world nation. And we may be anyway. We may be like Israel, and we may have gone so far that God just says, you know what, I'm done with you. I'm not going to bring you back. But I'm hoping that there's enough true Christians, enough true believers in this country to maybe turn things around. One of the other things is there's just one or two of these back here. It's called Prayer Force, and this is put on by Open Doors. I'm wearing a Voice of the Martyrs thing, but I'm not sponsored by Voice of the Martyrs. I'm not sponsored by Open Doors. They both provide materials for me to some extent. Most of what I get I have to buy, but that's okay. That's part of my ministry. But if you look at this Prayer Force, it has information on it for how to pray each day of the month. It gives different areas, and this is through Open Doors. Both organizations have a way to write letters to the persecuted. I would suggest using the Open Doors avenue because you're sure that your letter through them is going to get to the persecuted person. They actually hand deliver the letters. If you go through Voice of the Martyrs, you send it off and you don't know, I'm going to show you another video here in a little bit that's going to show the importance of letters and Bibles to these people that are in these countries. Let's see, the other thing I've got is that's back there. And like I say, if something runs out, let me know. I will get more. I'm getting more all the time. I've got stuff coming in now. I was hoping it would come in before this weekend, but it didn't. There's two different kinds of global prayer guide. Global prayer guide. That's kind of a tongue twister. And it tells you what's going on in these countries. It tells you about the government. It tells you what the Christians need as far as prayer. How they need us to pray. And it helps you to pray specifically. Part of our weekly prayer group that I want to get will be specifically praying for the persecuted church, as well as our pastors, as well as our missionaries. And then at some point we will even get into the individual prayer requests. But as an American church, we're so centered on our own little needs and wants. We forget there's a bigger picture out there. We're supposed to pray in the will of God, and God's will is that we pray for our brothers and sisters. I mean, he says, I know what you need. Why are you asking for food and shelter and clothing? He gives us examples that go ahead and ask for, but don't dwell on it. He says, I know what you need, but he wants us to pray for those that are suffering, that are going through hard times. I'm going to go ahead and have John play that next one. I think that was all I had on the stuff back there. Go ahead, John, and hit that next video for me, if you would.
I am in prison for telling others about Jesus.
มื้อนี้เจ้าตายแน่นอนเอามื้อนี้ เฮ้ยถึงมาใส่รับบริการดิเซ็นชื่อสารภาพมาตรงนี้นี่เซ็นตรงนี้โกหกทำไมสารภาพผมยิงคุณเองไหนพระเจ้าของคุณเป็นคริสเตียนอ่ะช่วยตรงนี้สิสารภาพมา
I don't know why they didn't shoot me. The interrogations are the only time I am out of solitary.
ไม่ต้องการคนเป็นคริสเตียน
I am losing hope and fear I have been forgotten.
คริสเตียนคือ CIA รู้ไหม
I recite Bible verses to myself, but the words are getting harder and harder to remember. I can handle the torture, the starvation, but I desperately need my Bible. Every day I pray over and over for God to give me a Bible. Now I have my chance. The interrogations have ended, and the guards trust me to go into the jungle to gather firewood. Working as fast as I can, I will collect 2 days' worth of firewood. I'll bring one bundle back and leave the second bundle in the woods. This is what I need to do. It is very risky, but God is answering my prayer. I will risk everything to have a Bible. don't want to leave my wife, but I have to, or she will be in danger. Leaving her is so hard. God has answered my prayer. I have a Bible, but I must be careful. They found my Bible, but I would not give up. I will bring in more Bibles. I will read God's word every chance I get. Then the letters came.
นี่อะไรนะคุณจันไม่รู้ได้ไงเนี่ยชื่อคุณมันจดหมายเนี่ยอะไรเนี่ยอะไรจดหมายจากทั่วโลกไอ้เนี่ย
Letters from me. Letters from Christians all over the world. God not only answered my prayer for a Bible, He let me know I am not forgotten.
เยตคุกเพราะว่าอามาคนทั่วโลกได้รับเนืองโอแล้วเอาเพื่อนพระคัมภีร์โอนองเยตตุ่มเพาะตื้มตะคุก10 ปีโออ่านพึ่มพระคัมภีร์แล้วพระเจ้านูนเรียมโอแล้วก็สู้แล้วก็ขอบคุณพระเจ้าขอบคุณอนาพี่น้องทั่วโลกที่อธิษฐานอ้อนวอนเพื่อโอ้แล้วก็มู่คู่ที่น้องอยากตะคุกแล้วก็ขอบคุณพระเจ้าขอบคุณพี่น้องทั่วโลก
How many of us love our Bible that much? How many of us love the Word of God that much that we would go through what He did? How many of us have several Bibles around that we don't have to tear the pages out of because we have the freedom to keep them? I was talking earlier about the books back there. One of them, they're all inspirational. One of them, by Brother Andrew, is a real feel-good book. If you guys are having trouble with your faith and you need something to pump your faith up, read God Smuggler. There's no sad parts in it at all. The man is just, it's all about God's faithfulness, God's getting him through. I mean, the stuff he went through is amazing. If you didn't know that he was a Christian and he wasn't lying to you, you would think it was some kind of fictional story, the way God worked in his life and how God allowed him to smuggle these Bibles into these communist countries. It's just amazing how God provided the money. I love the fact that he would never ask for money. That was part of his training from the missionary establishment he went to. Is they were never allowed to ask for money. They had to allow God to work. And one of the tests was for them to go out to evangelize an area. And I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it was they were given £1 to take with them. And they were supposed to live and do their ministry on that. And the catch was, when they come back, they had to pay that £1 back. And he talks about how he went out and he trusted God, and he actually came back with more money than he left. Other people came back in debt. So, I mean, it's just a great book. The other one, Heavenly Man, if you don't believe in miracles, you need to read Heavenly Man, because that man is still alive. As a matter of fact, I don't see her here, but somebody last session came up and says, well, I met this guy. He's still around. He's still active. He's a little Chinese guy that started when he was 16 years old as a pastor, and he was instrumental in starting the house church movement in China. And he actually had to flee for his life. He spent 14 or so years in prison. They beat him so bad that they broke his legs And again, God intervened and actually brought healing to him, just like Peter walked out with the gates swinging open. He actually was freed from jail one time, and it's all documented. He's got third-party witnesses, so it's not a fairy tale. It's real life. He's still active. Right now he's recruiting Chinese for what he calls his Back to Jerusalem movement. He's training Chinese evangelists to take the old Silk Route back through the Middle East, back to Jerusalem, and carry the gospel back through all these Muslim countries. And he knows as he trains these Chinese men and women that they're going to be killed. I mean, very few of them are going to survive to get to Jerusalem, but that's what he believes God has told him to do, is to take this gospel back to the Muslim countries. The other one is called Tortured for Christ, and that was written by Richard Wormbrand. He was the starter of Voice of the Martyrs, and it again is one that basically shows God's faithfulness, shows God's care, and it shows just how much grace God will give you in a certain part of your life when you need it. He was getting beat daily for praying, because when you're in prison, you're not allowed to pray. And one day the jailer came in and was screaming in his face, "You've lost everything. You've lost your family. You're beat. You're half dead. You're half starved. What is there to pray for?" And he said, "I'm praying for you." He was praying for the jailer. And that's the kind of faith we need in this country. We need to have a fire lit inside us, so that our concern is for those around us. Scripture says that we're not to take any care for ourselves, but we're supposed to look to each other to lift up the others. And not just in this building, not just in this town, but for those brothers and sisters that are truly suffering, like we saw in these videos. These videos were dramatizations, but you saw the real people at the end talking. I mean, we're talking about real people here. Anyway, I didn't have a chance to ask if there was, I'm running out of time, if there was any questions, if there was anything that yes, sir?
I have a question about this. What exactly are you wanting us to put on this?
Just a day that you would be willing to come to a Bible study, if you could. And no names, please, no names on any of these. I don't want to know who wrote the cards. I just want to know what day you would think of coming, and what would be the best time. Yeah, we'd be meeting here. We'd be meeting here. Yes, sir. Oh, now that I've got your attention, will you get up and hand out those sheets for me? Oh, we could do that too. Yeah, I've got, like I told you, I've got a little story. I've got one for each family, because I don't have enough to go around. And this was quite a little thing. I've been chasing this around. I tried making copies at the library, and I broke the library copy machine. So then I had to come back here, and Pastor Dustin was going to do it, and he forgot. And so then I captured Tricia, and she did it. So really appreciate these when I give them to you and read them. Anyway, other than that, I guess I'll close. I have a statement out of Matthew 25:40, and I'll close with this. "And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me." Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming, and I hope God opens your heart to the suffering church.